How would you distinguish the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism?
I wouldn't. Next. um, so it's a good question. Again, we also have a video on this on JTV, so you can watch that. It's called, I think it's called Why Anti-Zionism is Anti-Semitism, with a guy called Alon Levy, who's I think he's an I-24 news presenter. I hope I get that right, but I think he is. And I think, basically, it gets a little bit confusing when you deal with Jewish anti-Zionists, especially religious Jewish anti-Zionists. But let's just speak broadly first, and I'll deal with the religious Jewish anti-Zionists. The reason why I think anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism is because if you believe that all peoples have a right to self-determination in a homeland, except for the Jews, hence the name anti-Zionist, Zionism means belief in the right of the Jewish people to self-determination in their ancient homeland, then you have a clear double standard against the Jewish people. That is persecution against the Jews, right? The exception I'd make is if you don't believe that any state has the right to exist, that no people have the right to their own self-determination, then I think that's a problem. And then the other issue is people say, well, maybe Jews have a right to a state, but they can't steal land, from. But then you need to get into a little bit more detail of the history, and you understand. And it's very, very clear that while it's perfectly legitimate to say that the Arabs have a legitimate claim to the land, it's equally, or if not more legitimate, to say that the Jewish people have a claim to the land, given their history, given the fact they've always had a presence there, given the fact that the last nation state in Israel was a Jewish one. There's never since that point, it's always just been other empires and other countries taking control of the land, and the fact that the Jews have always been prepared to divide the land and split the land, and the only time really you had conquering of Arab territory was when Jews were engaged in a defensive war. So that again is why I think it's to say the Jews stole the land, it's illegitimate. It's just being blind to history. Also taking into fact all the suffering and anti-Semitism they've experienced, these people have a right to live somewhere. They need to have a right to exist. They need to have some level of self-determination. But the principal point is, if everyone has a right to self-determination, but the Jews don't, that's a double standard. That's anti-Semitic. Now, what happens when you have Jewish people who are anti-Zionist? Let's deal with first secular Jews who are anti-Zionist. Well, in that instance, if I'm Jewish, I'm secular, and I say Jews, love money, all Jews love money, is that any less anti-Semitic just because I'm a Jew that's saying it? No. It's still, you can be, newsflash, you can be anti-Semitic and Jewish at the same time, right? We have a lot of people who are like, we call David Hirsch, who's a historian that talks about left-wing anti-Semitism, talks about as a Jews, who say, as a Jew, I think Israel's disgusting. The only time they utilize their Jewish identity is to bash Israel, right? So you can be Jewish and you can be anti-Zionist, which is anti-Semitic. Now, what about religious Jews, like the Neturei Karta, who, by the way, people say, oh, it's the Haredim, they're all... No, it's a very, very tiny sect of the radical religious right called the Neturei Karta. Most Haredim are, cooperate, support the existence of the state of Israel, but the Neturei Karta are a very small sect who say, no, we as Jews should not support the existence of the state of Israel. I would still say that what they're doing is a form of anti-Semitism, because you're holding the Jewish people to a different standard to everyone else. You're saying they don't have the right to the land of Israel. But it's important in that sense to understand they have a very specific intention and motivation, which is that they believe they're religiously authorized to do this because they believe that the Torah or the Talmud says that the Jews have no right to create a state of Israel until the Mashiach comes. So I would say in that instance, first of all, consider the harm they're doing. I mean, yeah, they are doing some harm. We should try and fight back against what they're doing. But what they're doing is inspired by how they view religion. They're not inspired, let's say, by let's say radical Islamic extremism, which also calls for Jews to be killed worldwide. So little bit less concerned about the Neturei Karta in comparison. But yes, I would still say at the end of the day, they just believe their position is a form of prejudice against Jews. It's just religiously inspired from their perspective, and so it's a little bit more nuanced in their instance. But generally speaking, if you come across someone who says the Jews stole the land, they have no right to exist, at best they're ignorant, and at worst they're engaging in a form of anti-Semitism. But always best to educate when you can, because most people it's just tends to be this lack of awareness.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button, and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.